I first had to scavenge some of the parts off of the original downpipe so I could fabricate a new downpipe that would connect to my existing exhaust. What I hoped was going to be a one-day project to just make a new downpipe to connect my GTD1752vrk turbo to the rest of my exhaust system ended up being about a 4 or 5 day project to redo the entire exhaust system on my TJ Wrangler. Having all the new parts and pieces that I needed, I went about cutting all the pipes to the correct length and then tack welding everything in place for my new downpipe for my new turbo. While I'm not showing everything, this was a multi-hour process just to get everything in place correctly for the new downpipe. One nice thing about sourcing this turbo from TDI.pl is that it included the exhaust flange, so I was able to create this downpipe to connect the turbo to the rest of my exhaust system. Alright, I'm pretty much at a good stopping point for today. I had a couple of interruptions and the welder I've been using for like the last 10 plus years just finally stopped working, so I had to go and get another welder, so that was kind of unexpected. Now I'm still learning the welder, but overall I'm really happy with it. It's basically the same welder that I had, but much smaller. So far I'm really happy with it. It actually welds really well, but I'm still learning it. But let me show you what I have gotten done so far. I have this right where I want it. It's not gonna hit anything, but it has a lot of movement. So I'm really happy with it, and I'm trying to mate it up to this, but what I'm trying to get rid of is this flexi pipe here. That's what I really want to get rid of. So I need to unhook, hold on, there we go. I need to unhook the diesel catalytic converter. I need to get this pipe off, which I've tried doing before, but it's kind of stuck on that end, so I have a feeling I'm going to end up cutting it. And then I am going to use a straight piece of pipe and figure out, ooh, it's really bright down here, but figure out how to connect this to this here. And I did scavenge this piece off my old downpipe, but I will be doing that tomorrow. One of the things I quickly realized is if I was going to do this exhaust system correctly, I needed to not be using these exhaust clamps. So I quickly realized I would have to weld the entire exhaust system, especially with how difficult it was to get that flexi pipe off. But it was when I was getting this other end off that I started realizing my muffler might be causing me a problem. So this is day 3 of working on getting the exhaust fabricated for my GTD1752vrk turbo, which is a mouthful to say. I do have the downpipe almost completely fabricated. I realized I forgot to drill and weld in the bung that holds the EGT probe, so I will be doing that at some point today. The other thing I want to show is why I'm also redoing the rest of the exhaust. This was the piece that I had installed years ago, and it made my life easier, but this is not the proper way you want to have an exhaust system. So I'm going to be replacing that pipe with this one. Now, as I was trying to get that pipe off, I started really looking at the muffler I had installed. And to be very honest with you, I have no idea what this muffler is from. But one of the things I noticed is this is not a pass-through or straight-through muffler. And let me get a flashlight so I can show you what I mean. So if I take this light here and turn it on, I don't know if you can see this on the camera, but there is no light coming out the other end. And I think that's kind of important only because of the fact that I want heat to get out of this exhaust system as quickly as possible. And I'm also almost positive this is creating some kind of restriction. I'm not saying it's very restrictive, but it is going to be doing something. So I went out today to find a new muffler, and I actually managed to find one in the town where I live. And I am going to be installing this Magnaflow universal muffler. Now, what I like about this muffler is, one, it's a pass-through. So going back to our light example, you can see light coming through the other outlet, which is really nice. The reason why I selected this muffler is it's actually packed full of, I believe, fiberglass and other sound deadening material, because while I do want my exhaust system to be free flowing, I'm not looking for a very loud exhaust, and I really don't want to have a drone either. With all that said, I'm going to get to work to install this on my TJ. What I thought would end up being a fairly simple install ended up becoming a real jigsaw puzzle to figure out how I was going to get this new Magnaflow muffler installed onto my Wrangler along with the diesel catalytic converter. My original idea was to replicate the exhaust system that I had, where the catalytic converter was going to be in front of my cross member that holds up my transmission and transfer case. But I quickly realized it was going to be a lot easier to fabricate everything if I moved the diesel catalytic converter to be connected almost directly to my muffler. It just made setting up everything else a lot easier, because right around this area, the frame actually spreads outwards on a TJ Wrangler, which just gave me all the room I needed to get the rest of the exhaust system fabricated. Unfortunately, here is where I made the biggest mistake of that day. I welded an exhaust U-bolt onto the crossmember. Now, I have been doing this for years with the flexi pipe. What I didn't realize was by doing that, without using the flexi pipe, made the entire exhaust system 100% rigid and it would not move. But I wouldn't discover that until I welded the entire exhaust system up. What made this exhaust project interesting was I was having to learn how to weld with my new welder. Now, it was later pointed out to me by a friend that I was using the wrong size welding wire. I was welding with a 35 thousandth wire, and I really should have been using a 23 thousandths wire. But even with that said, I was very happy with the results, and it gave me a lot of time and practice to figure out this new link-in weld pack. After getting the exhaust fully welded, I had to reinstall the crossmember that held up my transmission and transfer case. I removed it so I could get the exhaust low enough to weld all the way around it. The last thing I had to do was drill and tap a hole into my downpipe to hold my EGT probe. I did this because there wasn't an obvious port on the exhaust manifold that I could easily install the EGT probe. Yes, I'm going to lose a little bit of temperature since it's post-turbo, but I'm not going to be pushing this so hard where that's really going to matter. To finish up everything on the downpipe, I took out a new sanding tool and I cleaned out all of the burrs and everything on the inside of my downpipe. That way I wouldn't damage anything in my catalytic converter or my muffler. At this point, I probably should have stopped because it was really late at night, and it was so late that I forgot to film myself putting the downpipe on the turbo. But I did remember to film connecting the downpipe to the rest of my exhaust. And right about now is when I realized the mistake I made with the exhaust.
Good morning, everyone. Coffee is still kicking in. If I look tired, my apologies. I got a lot of the exhaust system done last night and I'm really happy with it, but I did realize I kind of made a mistake, and in realizing it last night, I think I have a solution. So first I'm going to show you the mistake I made, and then I'm going to show you how I'm going to fix it.
So here's the mistake I made, and it's this U-bolt here. Now, ever since I had the Kubota diesel in this Wrangler, I've done this to help hold the exhaust into place, but the difference being, I always use that flexi pipe, and that pipe would still move a lot. Well, what I realized last night is when I went to clamp this down, the exhaust was rigid. It had no movement at all, and this really needs to be able to move. So I need to remove this and hang something so the exhaust can be supported. The idea I'm having, if we come over here, you will see I have an exhaust hanger with a rubber grommet and this metal piece going to the exhaust here. Now, obviously I can't use that piece. It's holding up the back of my muffler. However, if I walk behind my shop really fast, I have a wrecked TJ Rubicon right there, and it still has the exhaust on it. So I'm gonna get some tools and rob that exhaust hanger and everything off of the wrecked Rubicon and modify it so I can put it on my new exhaust so my exhaust system will hang correctly. So I'm gonna get to work.
Scavenging the two pieces I wanted off the wrecked Rubicon, I first marked the frame where I was going to mount one of the hangers. Then I went about removing everything so I could drop the exhaust low enough to drill and tap threads into my frame to hold that hanger. Now, normally I'm a huge proponent of installing nutserts, but I realized looking at both my TJ and the TJ Rubicon behind my shop, all these exhaust hangers are just held in place with threaded holes in the frame, so I figured if it was good enough for Jeep, it was good enough for me. What I'm doing here is adding a brace to this one mount. It's normally mounted vertically, but I'm laying it on its side just because of my space requirements, and this will give the bracket more strength to hold up the exhaust. The last thing I have to do is just remove this U-bolt that I welded to my cross member, and then I'm cleaning it up with a flapper wheel. After painting all the parts, I then installed the hanger back onto the frame before welding on the hanger onto the exhaust. For the moment, I think the exhaust system is done. Now what I need to do is hook up the N75 valve to the vacuum actuator on the turbo. That's going to be real quick. I need to fill the radiator and the coolant system with water again. That's going to take a little bit of time. And the last thing I need to do is hook up another ECU. I got this from Techmetronics. I hope I'm saying that right. And this tune was specifically designed for this turbo for an automatic application. My previous tune, idle, was at about 1,000 RPM, but on an automatic, you kind of don't want that because then the torque converter is building pressure and trying to push the vehicle forward. So I have on this tune, the idle should be more to whatever the stock idle is for a Volkswagen TDI. Now, I'm not going to permanently install this yet. I'm just going to unhook my ECU where I have it plugged in right now and just hook this in and let it hang. But yeah, hopefully in the next hour or so, we can hear this thing run. Turns out there were a lot of connections I had undone, so I reconnected everything, hooked up the ECU, and then went about putting water into the radiator system. The final thing I did was reconnect my Optima battery to my TJ. Fire in the hole! I think I'm going to call it quits for this video. I am very happy with where I'm at. It's great to hear the Wrangler running again. I've actually done a lot since I last turned on the camera. I've let this engine idle at about 1200 RPM because that's where it idles right now for about an hour. And I did that so everything would heat cycle. I kept plugging and unplugging the fan so the coolant temperature could get up, and I wanted to make sure the thermostat opened, and it allowed me to check for leaks and let me check all the exhaust work and everything's working great. I'm really impressed with this turbo. It sounds great and things are really coming along. But anyway, that's all I have. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again sometime soon. Goodbye.